Hello, this is Todd Hubbs, agricultural economist at the University of Illinois. Today I'm talking about my October 22nd weekly outlook. Corn prices continue to look for support. Last week we saw corn prices retreat back to levels not seen since before the October production report. After the lowering of yield, we saw corn prices rally a little bit, but a couple of pieces of fundamental news have started to weigh on corn prices. One, we've seen weekly ethanol production levels down as ethanol margins have gotten smaller. And we also saw a somewhat bearish export sales number last week. I think this might just be a blip, but I'm going to talk about it more in detail. But as we move forward, it looks like we might need some action on the supply side to see a significant rally in corn prices. What I'm showing you guys here is weekly ethanol production and ending stocks numbers from the EIA. As you can see, over the last month, we saw weekly production fall from the torrid pace we were setting this summer. We're still up about 1.6% over last year, but we're sort of trending downward, and we're seeing stocks build a little bit. There's a couple of things I think going on here. One, we've seen profit margins shrink for ethanol plants, and two, I'm not sure the export numbers for ethanol are going to be there in the fall of the year. Reports last week saw ethanol stocks in Brazil up 29% year over year. We saw a switching away from sugar production and back into ethanol production in their cane crop. So, as we look forward into the 18-19 marketing year, currently the USDA has a 5.65 billion bushel projection. I think it may be closer to what we did last year, a little over 5.6 billion bushels on flat blending use, despite what we've heard about E15 and sort of flat ethanol numbers over the marketing year for exports. So, while it's still strong, it's sort of a pullback from the torrid pace we were setting earlier in this year. While we've seen sort of a pullback in ethanol use for corn, it's still at a good level, but it has been a pullback. Corn exports have been very strong, despite the negative net export sales number last week. Outstanding sales are up 27% over last year. In this graph, I'm showing corn export inspections through the first 7 weeks. We're up 72% over last year's, what I think is relatively cheap corn prices, and strong global demand for corn will continue to see corn exports be a real good spot for corn use in the 18-19 marketing year. Now, while it might tail off this completely strong pace we've been early in the marketing year, I do expect the USDA number to be somewhat close to where we come in at this point in time. When we're thinking about how exports will look this year, global supply is going to matter, and in the next slide I'm going to talk about global prospects for corn production this year. In this slide I'm showing corn production from major exporters in the world, and for China. I like to put China in there just because they're the talk of the town these days. Right now we're sitting about 14.8 billion bushels of corn production in the U.S., coming off that 0.6 bushel an acre national yield lowering in the October crop production report. I sort of feel like it might come down a little bit more before it's all said and done. But when we look at South America in particular, there's an expectation of higher production this year, both in Brazil and in Argentina, as Argentina recovers from the drought and Brazil puts in a little bit more corn acreage. Right now, these projections of Argentina and Brazil are on trend yield, so it's still to be seen if these numbers will come to fruition, but they're off to a really good start in their corn crop year, both countries are. And so any kind of deviation one way or the other might have an impact on corn exports as we move forward. We've seen a somewhat poor crop in the former Soviet Union countries. I think that's probably going to be correct. It might come down a little bit more, but the number the USDA is currently putting out there right now may be close. So all in all, I think global corn production will be up. U.S. is still the major producer. I think we'll have strong exports, and depending on what happens in South America, and this is true for both soybeans and corn, will go a long way in determining just how strong our exports will be in the 18-19 marketing year. Currently, WASDE is projecting 1.813 billion bushels of ending stocks. Now, while I think ethanol use might be slightly lower, and feed and residual use might be slightly lower. We're talking maybe 50 to 75 million bushels. We're going to see strong corn consumption through 1819, and I think that has positive prospects for post-harvest corn prices. But to see a really strong rally, any kind of good support in corn prices as we move forward, it looks increasingly like we're going to need some kind of supply change from the current outlook, which means a much lower yield for U.S. corn production, which is feasible but probably unlikely to see a large yield drop or problems with the South American crop in particular. I'd like to thank you for your time. As always, you can find my weekly outlook and daily analysis of issues related to Corn Belt farm economics at farm.daily.illinois.edu. I look forward to seeing you around the state of Illinois.